Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to a Media Matters special. The Bundesliga season is finished, and that means Liverpool are interested in players galore from Germany. There's links, there's targets, there's things developing every single second, as we know right now. And I'm pleased that we need a Bundesliga expert, so we managed to get one. Unfortunately, Ninad Barbadikar is with us, a regular contributor for the Bundesliga site. Ninad, how are we?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we'll see if you say that after we've asked the 8,000 million questions we've got for you. But we'll get right into it straight away. And it's an interesting one, Ninad. Now that the season's finished, the Bundesliga season's finished, I should say, there are links galore coming out for not just Liverpool, but other clubs involved in Bundesliga players. There's going to be a lot of movement, departures from the Bundesliga to the Premier League, isn't there?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's been another interesting year, I should say, in terms of player development for the Bundesliga, where a lot of players have taken significant steps, and at least in making themselves appear Premier League ready in terms of making that next step. I think it's just a result of what we're seeing. The number of players that we discussed, like you say already, it's an exciting time to be someone following the Bundesliga and the Premier League. So yeah.
Yeah, and it will be exciting for us as Liverpool fans if they arrive at our club. So there's a fair few players we want to talk about, so we'll get into it straight away. And probably the hottest link, you had no doubt I was going to ask you about this, Jeremie Frimpong. I mean, this is the one all over the news. It almost feels a matter of when, not if. So people are naturally like us. We're watching YouTube compilations. We're catching all the Leverkusen matches we could before the end of the season. Maybe a simple question, but difficult to answer. What would you say were Frimpong's best attributes as a player? How would you profile him?
So I think we've seen possibly the best version of what Frimpong can be in the past couple of seasons since Xabi Alonso has come in. And he's, obviously we've read a lot about his sort of use as a wing back, and even more so sometimes as a right winger. So I think there's a sort of bigger emphasis on his attacking qualities, where he can sort of use his pace to almost outpace anybody on their finest day. I think that's one of his biggest attributes, where he can just use that pace all day to make runs in behind like defenses and sort of hurt opposition backlines inside the penalty box with his movements. Even if he isn't the greatest finisher, it's the amount of volume he gets in those movements into the box and sort of affecting ball progression with his carrying. I think those are some of his key attributes, where he's with the ball, he's just rapid and he's just on the go all the time. So yeah, very exciting player to watch on and off the pitch.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the off the pitch side, because as you said, on the pitch, you see him, he is rapid, and the Bundesliga published their physical data. There's no two ways to doubt that at all. Off the pitch, he does seem, maybe it's right to say, a bit of a character, a bit of a personality. Is that fair to say?
It would be absolutely fair to say that. And I think anybody who's even tried to have a partial interest in the Bundesliga will have followed Archie Reintutz's interviews, post-match interviews. Archie is great, by the way, for ESPN. So whenever he does an interview with Jeremie, you can see just that sort of bubbly side come out of him. And I can see Jeremie fit really well as a player, not just at Liverpool, the club, but also Liverpool, the city. We already know he's got the Scouse accent nailed down. So that's half the struggle finished. But yeah, he is a great character, and I think in terms of the dressing room vibe that he can improve, he's already a big personality, and there's already a Dutch contingent at Liverpool who will no doubt welcome him with warmth. Let's just say,
Yeah, there's a number: Van Dijk, Gakpo, Gravenberch, etc. And obviously the manager Arne Slot. And that was one thing I did want to ask you, Ninad, with this. And he has been developing. We've seen the stats. We've seen certain metrics. Wanting to be obviously completely respectful to Leverkusen. It's a jump now for him to the Premier League, a different style, a bit more physical that way. Would you say the feeling in Germany is that he's ready to take this step?
I think so. And I think another aspect to this is that it's a great market opportunity for Liverpool to get in someone who's available at a manageable price and who's obviously got a really high ceiling offensively, where you've seen teams trying to purchase fullbacks and try to purchase defenders in the sense of controlling the game a lot more. We've seen Arsenal invest in Ricardo Calafiori, Jurrien Timber. City have gone for the likes of Guardiola. These are centre backs who are sort of now playing as fullbacks, but Liverpool are sort of going the other way around, where they're going, no, we want more offensive players in our team, which is a very interesting approach. And I think Danny Cochran, a good friend of mine, and I'm sure a lot of Liverpool fans know him, he also made this point that sort of Liverpool are going against the grain of what elite sides are trying to do in terms of recruiting fullbacks who are a lot more offensive. So obviously, aside from Jeremie, within the Premier League, there's also links with Miros Kerkic, who I'm sure Liverpool fans are not tired of hearing his name anytime soon. I think it's a very exciting time to be sort of obviously be a Liverpool fan, but also have this sort of approach where you are sort of going against what the established elite sides are doing. And but specifically with Frimpong, I think there is definitely some concern about sort of his immediate physical adjustment with the Premier League, but I think that's where his the factor of his pace comes back into the equation, where he's just going to use his pace to sort of make up for any sort of deficiencies that he can. And I think it's an interesting sort of dynamic where obviously with Trent you had before certain defensive weaknesses. I still don't think he was as defensively weak as everybody made him out to be, but fair enough, each to their own. I think with Frimpong, you get different strengths, obviously, not the passing game that Trent has had, but already we can see on those FBref percentiles, he's a very, very strong carrier of the ball, gets in attacking positions really, really well. And can affect offensive play, which is at the end of the day, you want players who can affect goal scoring. And I think Frimpong does that absolutely to a very high degree.
Do you think ultimately that's why Liverpool have decided to pull the trigger on this one? That there might be a few concerns, as you said, around maybe physical metrics, defensive elements, but they will take that trade-off that for a fullback, and as you said, someone who can play in various positions down the right, the attacking elements are just that strong. It's worth the trade-off, the gamble, if you want to call it that. Absolutely.
And I think when you have someone like Mo Salah, who is, let's be honest, he's not getting any younger. As elite he has been, he's not getting any younger. And so if you have someone like Frimpong who can sort of stretch that right flank all day with his bombarding runs up and down the right, I think it's going to be a big plus for him to sort of have someone like Frimpong make those sort of inward runs and sort of pulling defenders away from him, trying to create more space for him on the right. And again, it's another player who can sort of facilitate space for Mohamed Salah, which is again what you want. He is your star player. You want him to see more of the ball and to be able to do things with the ball in the sort of best way possible. And I think Frimpong is someone who can really dovetail well with Salah and his qualities. So I think that's that. Yeah, I think the trade-offs are worth it with Frimpong, and I think there will be an element of patience with him, as is the case with I think a lot of Bundesliga players who make the transition to the Premier League, because as you know, Bundesliga is a lot more transitional, and I think there's a sort of element of players can sometimes arrive underdeveloped physically because it's not as physical as Liga 1 or La Liga, for example, or even the Serie A for that matter. But I think in terms of the athletic attributes, Frimpong is as good as he can get in terms of that right side, right wing back, right back market. So even though he is not a traditional fullback, and he hasn't been a traditional fullback for a while, I think it will be interesting to see how Arne Slot can mold his game into Liverpool's system, and maybe that involves having more control in other areas of the pitch. Maybe that involves having McAllister and Gravenberch playing a little bit more deeper, controlling the middle of the park that way. I don't know. There's a few different permutations you can go about it, but again, it all comes back to the same point of the trade-offs are worth it when it comes to someone like Frimpong. He ticks so many boxes in terms of player quality, in terms of the characteristic fit, the personality. It makes absolute sense to go for this deal. So I can see why Liverpool are doing it. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to lie, you've got me excited about that one, Ninad. So I'm hoping this theme carries on, because you will have seen this player, his teammate, maybe his ex-teammate soon to be, Florian Wirtz. You will have seen all the stories, no doubt. And I don't want to assume, but I'd be astonished if this wasn't the buzz of German football right now. I mean, is it fair to say with Wirtz, we're not underhyping this? He is the star, or one of the stars of German football, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no questioning that. I think him and Musiala are two of the biggest stars currently in German football, and they are expected to be sort of the flag bearers for the national team in the coming years. And there is there's been a huge sort of excitement about Wirtz, coming through, at Leverkusen, and ever since his, I think in 2020 he made his debut. He's been a mainstay in the senior team, but in the last couple of years he's just gone to a different level under Alonso. It's hugely exciting to see where this player will go next, because I think the exit does feel inevitable, in the sense that you've already seen Xabi Alonso has announced his exit. You're seeing Jeremie Frimpong is close to an exit. I think there is a sense of inevitability to it. It's just a case of if Liverpool can sort of find the finances for it, because as we know, Man City have publicly, or seemingly publicly, sort of withdrawn their interest from him.
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see how the deal works out. But there's absolutely no doubt that Florian Wirtz is one of the most exciting players in the world, let alone Germany. So yeah.
Yeah, and there's probably one of the big reasons why Liverpool fans are so excited right now, obviously hoping no bad Bayern news, as we phrase it over here, comes in at all. So people will have seen him, and they'll look at some of his headline metrics and think 16 goals, 13 assists across the big two competitions, including the Champions League there. I did want to ask you, from sort of a regular watcher of the Bundesliga, what would you say is his best position and his best attributes as well?
So in terms of a position, obviously Wirtz is more of a playmaking sort of attacking midfielder. He plays in Alonso's system, plays just behind the striker. So normally Patrick Schick would be the starting forward, just playing behind the forward in that sort of pocket of space in the middle. But also not just limited to that, Wirtz sort of affects all phases of play for Leverkusen and offers them a lot of different solutions in different phases of play. Maybe not going as far as sort of helping the centre backs, but definitely helping that sort of being that connective tissue between midfield and attack, and then obviously executing the final sort of attacking action all by himself. So if it's a chance or if it's a shot that he takes himself, he's that kind of player who sort of affects the sort of overall landscape of your attack, if you will. So I think in terms, if I had to place him in Slot's system, I think I would see him somewhere in the spot in front of McAllister and Gravenberch, because I would still expect them to be the starting pivot for next season. I think in front of them, or if you will, maybe replacing Cody Gakpo on the left. But then how does that affect the dynamics elsewhere in the pitch is an interesting question. So I think maybe I can see Wirtz sort of have a little bit more of a freer role on the left or in front of the double pivot. So yeah, he is a number 10, a playmaker, if you will. And but he's also a lot more than a traditional number 10, in that he gives so much more off the ball. And I think, anybody can have a look at the Bundesliga website for his physical metrics, where he's always top in the charts in terms of sprints, duels won. Wirtz is phenomenal as a playmaker, phenomenal as an offensive maestro, if you will. But also, off the ball, he gives his team so much, and that's why he's such a coveted player. That's why he is, so highly regarded, not just in German football, but also outside of it. Yeah.
It does sound exciting, and you've sold me even more on this if I wasn't 1,000% in already, to be honest. And I suppose you'll have seen it, all the latest news. Is this, as it's described, almost just a straight fight between Bayern and Liverpool, with Wirtz ultimately making the decision. And maybe, just maybe, Leverkusen might be on our side a little bit with this as well.
It does seem that way, Dave. I think in terms of his profile and obviously the transfer fee that he will command, I think there is a big commitment, and obviously Man City have been unwilling to make that. And with Bayern, I think there's been a really aggressive sort of push from them, for him to be part of their team, for him to play alongside Musiala, which is, again, I think maybe like this big dream of the Bayern board to have two of the best German footballers on their team. So I think, yeah, it does seem like there's a bit of a two-horse race for him between Liverpool and Bayern. But I think it will be in Leverkusen's interests, obviously, to sell him off to a team outside of the Bundesliga. It only makes sense to do that. It will be interesting to see, though, if that actually does come to be, because I think this is a very, very special player. As much as it would sadden me to see him leave, I would be thrilled to see him sort of excel in another league, which I think is ultimately what his family wants for him anyway. Even if he does, in another sort of instance, does sign for Bayern, I think the idea maybe is for him to go abroad, away from Germany, anyhow in the future. But if that happens sooner, then so be it. His talents are so good. I think he's going to go straight to the top of the game. Absolutely.
Excited for this one. And it was the final question, because you touched upon it there, that if we picked it up right, his family, his dad especially, have a prime part as his advisor, part of his camp that way. And the big suggestions are that it's not really about money for Wirtz, it's about the project, where he can be successful, win the most trophies. Is that a fair assessment? I
think so. I mean, after being a sort of a key player of the Xabi Alonso era at Leverkusen, and even during this time, he's had significant interest in him. I think then he is definitely a player who will seek the right project to develop. In that sense, I was quite surprised that Man City were so eager to step away from him. I would have thought that they really saw him as the ideal Kevin De Bruyne replacement, because I see him a lot in the same light of De Bruyne, and that he can just be eventually at that level, at that he's just so good at everything. So yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how it all pans out. Yeah.
Fingers crossed we end up on the right side of this story as well. Even if that is a player leaving the Bundesliga, I appreciate. We'll see what happens with that one. And there's a couple of other players, actually both from the same club, funnily enough. Red Bull Leipzig, we're going across this time a divisive club in Germany, naturally, but two attacking talents especially who have been linked with us recently. Xavi Simons, so quite young, almost a strange deal that Red Bull did with Paris, wasn't it? That short 2-year deal, but almost being primed for a sale. I think that was obvious. And the one thing I did want to ask you, Ninad, on this, that the suggestions from the UK media that if it isn't Wirtz, who Liverpool are clearly trying to sign, that Simons will come in as the alternative, or he's second on the list, if you want to call it that. Is it right to compare the two players, or is that a bit harsh on Xavi Simons?
I think I can see where the comparisons are coming from, in that Xavi Simons does play in a sort of similar role to Wirtz at Leipzig, even if it is in a slightly different system. I would say that Simons is a lot more offensively involved, in that his maybe duties are maybe further forward a lot more. So you may not see him being involved as much in sort of deeper build-up play, etc., but you will see him sort of pull off every now and then these amazing sort of outside of the boot passes from just behind the halfway line, and that's been sort of like a trademark of his. So yeah, I think there are some similarities between the two, but Xavi Simons is a lot more offensively minded, and I think he's a bit more of a goal scorer. But with the sort of right attacking unit in front of him, maybe there's promise for him to sort of be part of this really strong attacking unit. Obviously, at Leipzig, he's already had Lois Openda, Benjamin Sesko, players who have really taken to him, and they've formed really potent attacking combinations on multiple occasions this season. But yeah, I think there are plenty of similarities between the two, so I can see why the links are being made between the two players. Yeah.
It is interesting, and maybe the difference when we look on FB Ref is that Simons also has two profiles, but one's as a midfielder and one's an attacking midfielder / winger. So I suppose that the question is, I appreciate it's different systems at the same time. Where would you say Xavi Simons' position is? Where do you think he would line up in his ideal scenario?
Again, Dave, I think it's sort of, in terms of the position, I think it's very much similar to what Wirtz can provide, in that he will want to be in that sort of playmaking role. Maybe even he might be happier to play again a little bit wider, because he does like the ball to his feet and then dribbling past players and then creating space or finding runners that way. So I think it's one of those two things where he's going to be fighting for the number 10 spot with Dominik Szoboszlai, or fighting for the left wing spot with Cody Gakpo. I think those are the sort of two areas that I can see him fit in the Liverpool system. It would be interesting to see how Arne Slot sees his talents fit into the system, because I think he is very versatile. But again, I think he obviously prefers to play more on the left-leaning positions. So even if he does start in central areas, you can almost always see him sort of drift to the left, collect the ball in wider areas, beat his man in 1v1 duels, and then just release the pass for the on-rushing forwards beyond the last line. So yeah, I think that's where we'll probably see him play if a deal does come to fruition.
It is an interesting one, and it's almost going to seem like a little bit like I'm picking on the physicality of the Bundesliga, but a bit like Frimpong, not the biggest player, and that's quite often the concern, shall we say, that are highlighted. Do you think he is ready to make that step to the Premier League, be it a bit more physical, the nature of the game? Do you think he's ready for it?
I think he might be, and I think again there's an element of again having a trade-off, in that obviously he without being the biggest player on the pitch, he can still affect the physicality of the Premier League, in that he is quite intense off the ball. Playing in the Red Bull system means that you are inevitably having to press a lot, and that's been a feature of Red Bull teams throughout the years. So I think again, Xavi Simons is another player like Wirtz who offers a great deal of defensive work and a good amount of work rate off the ball, as you can see on his defensive percentiles there. He is average or above average as compared to most attacking midfielders across the top 5 leagues. So certainly nothing to complain about as such in terms of his defensive work. I think he can use that to his advantage, but there will be with a player like Frimpong, with a player like Xavi Simons, there will be inevitably a sort of learning curve, if you will, physically, in terms of adjusting to the Premier League. But what he can bring offensively with his vision of passing, with his ability to find himself in attacking positions, again, a really inventive player. Much like Wirtz, very keen to play sort of 1-2 combinations with players and get in the box that way. And in fact, just last on match day 34, which was the last weekend against Stuttgart, I remember he scored this back heel goal off balance in the penalty box, which was a genius piece of improvisation from him. And I think you can expect to see a lot more of those things from him if he does come to the Premier League. Very much an entertainer. He's come through Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, now at Leipzig. So he's had a big sort of grounding in elite football setups. So there's already a lot of positives to take from that. So again, it's just taking that next step. And at Liverpool, under a slot with a team that has a sort of a solid sort of place for him to sort of grow and maybe have some room for error as well. As unforgiving as the Premier League can be, I think Liverpool is a place where now players can go with a little bit more confidence that this is a stable team, this is a stable core of players where we can maybe take our time to slightly bed in, and then be given the chance to flourish. So yeah, I think it's only a positive if players like Xavi, Simons and Florian Wirtz either of them are likely to come to Anfield. Yeah, you can promise to be very happy with both of them.
Excited for that one. And when we talk about physical players and maybe concerns or question marks around that, maybe it's the opposite a little bit with this player, Benjamin Sesko. I mean, when I look at Sesko, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, the raw attributes are pretty special, as in the physical gifts that he has, no doubts about it. How highly is he regarded, or how highly is he seen in the Bundesliga right now?
I'd say Sesko is one of the more raw strikers at the moment, as good as he is. In terms of being rated, I think he is up there with one of the most talented players in the Bundesliga. Certainly one of the most exciting strikers in the league in terms of the promise that he has shown so far with his goals and with his ability to score showstopper goals. Like he's got tremendous amount of power in his feet, and yeah, he's not afraid to take a shot, sometimes from crazy distances and unrealistic angles even. But yeah, he's got a lot of promise, and I think there's good reason to be excited about him and his future.
And it does seem and obviously to pick up what you said, because he sometimes does try the outrageous and sometimes it comes off, sometimes it really doesn't at the same time. There's almost a split camp around Sesko in terms of the raw attributes are worth pursuing, shall we say. Others saying he's maybe not quite refined enough, but he stayed at Red Bull last year. Almost, it felt like he was being primed to come to the Premier League or somewhere else this year coming or this summer coming. How do you see it with Sesko? Do you think it is the right time, or actually, in terms of just his pure development, is another year in the Bundesliga better for him?
It's an interesting question. I'll be honest. I think if a club had to invest in him now, it would be slightly more on the project signing end of things, where you might not expect him to deliver immediately. Because let's be honest, this is still a very young player. He's still sort of finding his feet in the top European leagues, and another season in the Bundesliga might be good for him, but another season elsewhere, and even in the Premier League, for example, will demand a lot more of him, and we might see different results from that process. Might not necessarily be better results, but they will be different. I'm being very careful with my words there, because I think there is a lot of promise with him, but he is raw. He still has, I think, a lot of development to do in terms of his finishing. As good as he is with his ability to generate power from shots, with his dribbling, I think he physically, like you say, he is, in terms of his athletic ability and in terms of his build and his size, he is as physically ready as a young player probably can be for the Premier League. And in many senses, he sort of reminds me of Darwin Núñez with his physical attributes when Núñez arrived in the Premier League, and there's been comparisons with Haaland, or that Sesko can be the next sort of Liverpool's Haaland, if you will. And I think for that to happen, there's going to be a little bit of a development period for him and a lot of adjustment. But yeah, you can see the science in this player that with the right coaching, with the right system, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how he develops. And another sort of interesting point to sort of note about his sort of trajectory so far is that he's obviously played in two-man striker systems. So again, sort of flipping that around. And so far at Leipzig, he's always played alongside Lois Openda and not played as much, further up front as, all by himself. So I think that's going to be another sort of learning curve element with him. But the promise is there. The promise is there, and the excitement is there for good reason. And I think Sesko, if you are getting someone like Sesko, you have to treat it more like a project signing. So at least give him one full season to bed in and then expect better results from him. So, yeah.
It is interesting to see. And let me say, 4 real players there who we'll have to see how the summer unfolds, but could potentially end up at Anfield, all with very different attributes. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We wanted Bundesliga expertise, and that is what we got. So all it really leaves me to say is, Ninad, for giving us the time, answering all the questions and that breakdown analysis. It is greatly appreciated.
My pleasure. My pleasure, guys. Take care.
And ladies and gents, that was another Bundesliga